In this video with the King, I'm going to go over tips for residency interviews, and that includes virtual interviews, as it seems like that's going to be something moving forward. If you want help from anyone on our team, we have a lot of us, that if you need help with this entire residency process, preparing for interviews, your personal statement, any of that, go ahead and check out this link. Check out our social media channels. We've got lots of stuff going on to help you. General tips for interviews. There are a million things that I could go over in this video, but I can't get to all of them, so I'm going to go over the things I felt like were the most important. One of which is, what questions are you going to be asked and how do you prepare for that? So that's coming in a little bit, but this is kind of general stuff as you're getting ready for this. As you're preparing for interviews, I would recommend doing some dressing out somewhat conservatively. You want to look very professional, kind of like a business interview essentially, is what I would recommend. And that means don't wear a yellow suit. It's okay to wear a little bit of flair, kind of have a red tie. That's what I did with a dark suit. For the ladies out there, they generally get a couple more colors in their outfits, but look conservative. Do your hair, make it look nice. Those kinds of things are going to go a long way. The next thing I would recommend is to smile. This is huge. This is a really big deal. And whether you're doing it virtually and you're smiling at a camera, whether you're in person smiling at them, remember that they already know all of your accomplishments. They've looked through your application. They've seen all of that. What they're looking for is, do I want to work with this person for the next few years? Do I want to be with them every single day? And one of the big things that I think probably one of the biggest, if not the biggest, is this a pleasant person to be around? Am I going to enjoy that? And smiling definitely helps with that. So don't forget to smile even though you're stressed. I know I was there not that long ago. The next thing is eye contact as you're smiling. And if you're using a camera, that means looking at the camera. If you're in person, then looking at their eyes. I'm going to show in a little bit of webcam that I felt like was really helpful when I was interviewing because it helped me keep eye contact a little bit better. The next thing is being very honest as you interview. And I'm going to touch a little more on this because I feel like this is important. There are some fields where if you say you want to go into academics or do research or whatnot, you feel like that's telling them what they want to hear. And what I will tell you is that generally speaking, they're able to see right through that. So be who you truly are and explain to them what are your career goals, where do you want to go with things, and why is that residency program going to be the best residency program to set you up for those goals. And I think that being honest, especially when you're saying things that programs know that you're not supposed to say, can catch them off guard and be like, wow, this is a person who's very honest. We had someone on our team who was asked about their weakness, and generally people will say things like, oh, my weakness is, I'm a perfectionist, and so I can't stop doing things until it's done perfectly. Whatever. That's using the answer to make yourself look better, things like that. But they answered the question in a very real way and told them their weakness and something that they were working on and how to get over it and things like that. And the interviewer was so caught off guard, they said, wow, I don't think I have ever had somebody actually tell me what I felt like was their weakness. And it was seen as a positive thing for them. So I would recommend being very honest. Now, there are definitely things you don't want to say, but that comes with being prepared so that you do have answers to say, things that are going to make you look good but are honest. The next thing is having questions prepared. And I put this in blue because the next video in this playlist on YouTube here is going to be all about this. But basically, when you go into an interview, every single interview you go to, they're going to ask you, what questions do you have about our program? And there are questions that you need to have prepared to ask. And the questions you ask in the interviews are different than the questions you want to ask later in the interview day when they let you talk to just the residents. I call those kind of the real questions. But you are going to have lots of question time during interviews, and they're going to expect you to ask like real in-depth things to make it look like you actually are genuinely interested in their program. And you want to know exactly what to ask when you're talking to the program director versus somebody else as well. I did have some interviews where the entire interview for 20 or 30 minutes was me asking them questions because they were not prepared to ask me questions about my application. So you need to be prepared for that. The next thing is be very polite and respectful to everybody. That means if whoever you're emailing, if it's the program coordinator, if you're on an away rotation or you're interviewing in person, the nurses, the MAs, everybody, they are all watching, and whether they say they don't play a role in the interviews or not, they do play a role. They can absolutely go talk to the program director and get you taken off that list, or they can say something very positive about an interaction with you that could help you quite a bit. So everybody is fair game. You should be polite and respectful to everybody. Being prepared obviously is the most important thing. You're already taking the first step by watching this video, which is good. That makes me happy, and that's why I put this out here. The rest of this video is going to talk a lot more about how I was prepared and questions you can be asked and things like that, so I won't touch on that much here. And then the Kevin Ahern videos, I feel like are really helpful. There's 2 videos. They're on YouTube. I'll link them in the description of this video. Basically, he's addressing pre-meds, and I watched this when I was applying to medical school. But I felt like the tips that he goes over about preparing for interview day, preparing to interact with people, shaking their hands if you're in person, all of those things were super applicable for residency interviews as well. And I would recommend that anyone who's interviewing for anything really should watch his videos. He does a really good job. So I'll link those for you. Video interviews specifically. So there's a lot to think about here, but I'm going to go over the important things because it does change a lot, and it seems like this is around to stay, at least for a little bit. One thing I know you've already thought about is the webcam. What webcam should you get? Now, I'm going to recommend one, but you could really get anything that's high quality and going to make you look reasonably good. The one I would recommend is the center cam, and I will link this in the description here. I actually have a discount code. This is a Kickstarter at the moment while I'm recording this. Hopefully it becomes an actual product later. The reason I really like this is because you're looking right at the camera and at the person the entire time, and it was actually a pretty high quality camera. It did a really good job. I felt like it was worth every penny getting it. As it's a Kickstarter, it did take me a couple months to get it, so just a heads up, I would order as soon as you possibly can. But just to give you an example, I'm looking right at the camera right now as I'm recording this video. It's about where I would place a webcam at the top of my computer if that's what I was using. Now, if I'm looking at somebody on Zoom, I would be looking like this, and I would be speaking to them like this. So you can see what it appears like to that person. Now, I can choose not to look at the screen or the face of the person I'm interviewing with and look at the camera, but then I can't see the face of the person I'm interviewing with, which is quite awkward. I felt like it was a little more stressful when I was doing like that. So I felt like the center cam was 100% worth it. It really made interviews a lot better. The next thing I would recommend is lighting, and I'm going to show a couple pictures here, but make sure that you have good lighting. I'd recommend putting a window or something in front of you. Don't have any backlighting. Just make sure that you're well lit. There's plenty of things. I will link in the description here. We have an Amazon list where I've linked web cameras, I've linked lighting, like things like that I felt like would be helpful for this. So you can check all of those out. Just make sure you have good lighting. The next thing is the background. And I don't think that there really is you need to have this in your background or this is what a perfect background looks like. It just needs to be not super boring. However, I did see some people interview against a blank wall, and I don't think it probably negatively affected them. So either way, you could be okay. This is an example of a picture I found on Google. It's obviously, looks good with the blur and stuff, which is not realistic for a camera, but you can see there's books and plants and stuff behind her, and that's what I did see when I was interviewing. Other people had similar things. Here's another quick example. It's just very simple, just adds a little bit of color behind you so you don't just blend in with the wall. I felt like that was helpful. Here's a bad example. You can see there's a lot of backlighting. It just doesn't look good, like looking up at the person, and the lighting is all off, and it's just not good. Backlighting you definitely should avoid. It'll make your camera like constantly trying to focus on you and things like that. It'll go out of focus, and the lighting looks weird. It's just bad. Just don't do any backlighting if you can help it. So anyway, with that, I'm going to go on to the actual questions you probably will be asked and how you can prepare for them. All right, so I prepared this huge list of questions that I have. I collected these from a lot of other people. There's a lot of dermatology questions on here, but you can use this to kind of get a gauge for what kind of questions you'll be asked about your specialty that you're applying to. But if you go to our website here, and then under the downloadable content, then there's this folder here that has all sorts of resources for this whole playlist. And you could basically go in and see stuff. So this is the next video that I'll make, but this is the video today. Interview questions you will be asked. I pulled this up. This is a huge list of everything. And I started out with stories here. You should have stories that relate to this kind of stuff. So this was like specific things for the specialty because I applied to pediatric prelims. You could make that dermatology or whatever other specialty. But then like have things that are like stressful times that you had and how you got through it, conflict, things like that. You don't want to be put on the spot when someone asks, tell me about conflict you had with somebody. And the only thing you can think of is when you got really mad at somebody and threw something at them and didn't act like a very good adult. You want to have a story that's better than that. Something that you learned from and grew and all of that. So, and then here's like basic interview questions that you're probably going to be asked in like every single interview. The tell me about your hobbies, tell me about your research you'll get in every interview. Assume that most people interviewing you have read your personal statement and they've read your hobbies, and that's about it. Only a couple people will have read your entire application. So unless that you know otherwise, assume that they really don't know that much about you. They haven't read the specifics on your application. These behavioral questions will come up quite a bit. I felt like had them in every single interview. There's actual interview questions here. And like I said, this document is stuff that I collected from a lot of other people and put together. But a lot of these were things that I was asked, and I was able to draw upon them. Now, all of you know me, I love Anki, so what did I do? I answered all of these and turned it into an Anki deck. So what I did is I made flashcards. So first I made it in Notion. I really like Notion. And these are like example stories that I had, and these are Sunday stories that I tell on our Instagram, like meaningful stories that I've had throughout the week with patients. If you're not following our Instagram, I try and share them every Sunday. So things that I had thought about and like learned there, like conflicts that I had had, stressful times that I'd had. And what I did, if you come over to Anki, you can see that I made an entire deck for derm interviews. So I'll pull that up under derm interviews. And you can see there's like a bunch of, this is, when did you disagree with an attending? Here's a story there. Like, when did you make mistakes? Here's all the Sunday stories I wanted to review. They weren't great flashcards, but it was enough that I could just remember like specific stories that I'd had and go through all of this. I even screenshotted parts of my ERAS application into it just to help me review. That way when I got to interviews, I was very prepared. I knew my application really well going into it and everything. So that's what I would recommend. Be very, very prepared. This list of questions is great. You should definitely like have some sort of story or connection or research project or something that you can connect to just about all of these. And then you'll feel very prepared going into interviews and you'll look a lot better. After the interview, there's just a couple things you should do, and one of those things is prepare for your rank list. Now, this is in blue because I'm going to make an entirely separate video on that. It's going to be later in this playlist about how to rank it, but the important thing you should be thinking about immediately after you interview is what do I need to remember about this program? Write down everything you can think. How do you feel? What were your interactions like? Were there any specific details throughout the day? And one thing I would highly recommend is a contact. Make sure you've talked with a resident and get their contact. Don't forget about that. But I will make an entirely separate video on this. The important thing now is to realize that it's going to be months later when you have to make the decision. So you want to have lots of notes for yourself. And the last thing is thank you notes. A lot of people have asked me about this, and what I would tell you is that truthfully, I do not think a thank you note is going to alter where you are on a program's rank list at all. And so they really aren't necessary. I did not send almost any thank you notes to people that I interviewed. Now, post-interview communication, as you're getting closer to the rank list time, which we can talk about in future videos, that may or may not play a role. But that is like sending a thank you note right after the interview to the person you interviewed and saying thank you for interviewing me is really not going to affect anything. So generally speaking, I would say it's not worth doing it. I had a lot of programs that specifically told me like don't even bother. So anyway, that's my thoughts on that. That's all I have for this video. There are a lot of videos coming still in this series, but hopefully that was helpful for you. Make sure you subscribe to the channel so you can see the rest of these coming soon. Thanks for learning with the OnKing. Be sure to subscribe to our YouTube channel here, as well as follow us on Facebook, Instagram, or Patreon. That is at OnKingMed. Also, feel free to reach out via email or check out our website, onkingmed.com, for more tips and tricks.